I should start recording. Yesterday we went over, before we started this assignment, the difference or the 2 points of view that are outlined in the assignment we did, basically fundamentalist versus modernist. We have people who basically emphasize religion and emphasize or are on the side of the Butler Act and say, no, you shouldn't be teaching evolution, versus modernists who are basically on the side of evolution, okay? And how this comes to the forefront is through the Scopes monkey trial, all right? So like I said, we're going to go over basically the main people in this argument, who is the people we need to pay attention to, or who is going to support and argue these main points. And then basically what the verdict is, what actually happens, okay? So obviously the forefront or the main player of this conflict, or the main player of this story, is John Scopes, okay? Oh, that would help. There we go. So the main player of this story is obviously John Scopes, okay? So we found out a little bit about him yesterday when we watched our short video, but John Scopes is basically a substitute teacher from Dayton, Tennessee. This is where our story lies, is Dayton, Tennessee. Very rural, small town in Tennessee. So John Scopes is a substitute science teacher. He teaches biology, among other sciences. He's also the head football coach at that specific school, so that's basically why he's a substitute. Back then, especially basically from the 1900s to the 1960s, it really didn't take much for you to become a teacher. So if you were part of the school system, you got to teach, basically. But John Scopes is a substitute science teacher. He teaches evolution in his curriculum instead of the creationist theory. We know this, we love this, we've all seen this, okay? At around the same time that John Scopes is substituting, we have the Butler Act coming into play. We've seen the definition, or we've seen what the Butler Act is, but just to refresh that the public school teachers may not deny the biblical account of man's creation. Basically, you can teach whatever you want, but if you directly deny the basically divine creation theory that all things came from God within the 6 days, basically the book of Genesis, then you were breaking the law. Yeah.
This is the federal law, federal act.
No, this was just a Butler or a Dayton, Tennessee law. This was just a Tennessee law.
Oh.
Yep. This Butler, that's a good question. This Butler Act was just a Tennessee law. This was not a federal statute. This was not something that was nationwide. It was just a Tennessee law. So if I'm John Scopes, I'm a substitute at this high school, and my whole curriculum or my whole lesson plans are focused around teaching evolution, I'm put in a pretty interesting predicament, right? I got to either decide, how am I going to change my stuff, or am I going to keep teaching it the way that I'm supposed to, or what I think is right, or should I go based off what the school should tell me? What should I do, basically? Okay. So there's this internal debate, basically, within the school and within Dayton, Tennessee, and within Tennessee in general, of should teachers teach what they believe, or should teachers follow the state laws, okay? So John Scopes is kind of in the middle of that, or that's the reason that we have this debate. John Scopes is relieved of his position, quote unquote, and then approached by people from an organization called the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, that says, hey, you were fired for not a very good reason. Would you like to be a part of this court case where we basically say that you can't, determine those types of things based on state law? You can't determine public or public school teachings based on state law. He said, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and do that, okay? So that's where we get the court case. It's not just because John Scopes is fired. It's not just because John Scopes continues to do evolution. It's because the American Civil Liberties Union comes up to him and says, hey, do you want to sue these people? Okay. All right, so John Scopes is like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to sue these people. Now John Scopes needs a lawyer. Okay, that's kind of the next part of the process. If you're like, I'm going to sue somebody, you definitely need a lawyer most of the time. Okay, it's normally not going to work out well if you defend yourself. Pro tip if you're ever in that situation. Okay, So John Scopes now needs a lawyer. And since he's going to be suing basically the state of Tennessee or the school district also needs a lawyer, okay? This publicity or this case had been gaining publicity before it even started. And John Scopes ends up with a really good lawyer, and so does the other side, the defense, okay? This lawyer versus lawyer battle basically becomes the battle of the century when it comes to really important court cases and how this plays out. Okay. Track if you want to take a picture of this, and then it is about your time to get heading as well. Good luck to you all as well. We're going to watch a video. I'll post it on Google Classroom. You'll enjoy it. Don't worry. Good luck. Good luck. Bye-bye. Yeah, Cole, Jerry. We're just missing Brendan. Okay. Bye, guys. All right, so these two lawyers face off in what we call the battle of the century, basically. That we have very little really monumental court cases up to this point, basically since like the founding of our country. And this was a case that was nationally recognized as very, very important and is going to be nationally broadcasted throughout the entire nation, okay? So the two guys on either side are the two lawyers who decide to kind of step up to the plate when it comes to representing these two sides. One of them is Clarence Darrow, and the other one is William Jennings Bryan. Clarence Darrow is Scopes' lawyer, so he is the one fighting that you should be able to teach evolution in schools, okay? Clarence Darrow was very well known before this. He had defended a lot of high-profile clients. He worked with the ACLU, and he intentionally took on very challenging cases, basically to make himself look like a really good lawyer, because he was a very good lawyer. He had previously defended gangsters and mob lords, so like literal murderers and literal people who you could clearly see breaking the law, and was still winning time after time. He had represented Al Capone at least once in his career, basically for a variety of different things, okay? So like I said, Clarence Darrow chose to take on very challenging clients and very challenging cases because he's always ready for a challenge. During this courtroom battle, Clarence Darrow is like on one. He is extremely witty in his questioning. He's very like put together, very strong, very forward, et cetera, et cetera. He went into this battle knowing that they probably weren't going to win, but he was going to embarrass whoever stepped out in front of him. Okay. So Clarence Darrow basically woke up and chose violence that day, and he was like, you know what, whatever happens, I'm going to go for it full force, okay? On the other hand, or on the defense, William Jennings Bryan was defending the state. And he was on the side of against evolution, so that the Butler Act should be upheld and that you shouldn't be allowed to teach evolution. During this battle, and basically in his career, so just a side note, William Jennings Bryan is not a lawyer. Clarence Darrow was like a practiced lawyer who had gone to law school, who had done the whole shebang. William Jennings Bryan is not a lawyer. He is a politician who decided to take on this case or kind of like be the lawyer in this case because it would make him look good. And throughout this entire case, or throughout the entire courtroom battle, he is constantly ridiculed or mocked as the, quote, image of Southern ignorance. Throughout the pictures and throughout the radio broadcast of this courtroom battle, so basically as they're witnessing and questioning back and forth, people just mock him for being this, quote, image of Southern ignorance. Because, I mean, he kind of looked like Colonel Sanders. He was a down-home Southern boy. He had a Southern drawl. He wore the bolo tie. He looked like it, and he kind of spoke like it too. William Jennings Bryan, number one thing when he came into this situation or when he took the stand was that he claimed to be an expert on the Bible and believed in literal interpretation. So he was very clearly a fundamentalist. But one of the big things that I'll kind of point out again, it'll come back to bite him, is that he claimed to be an expert on the Bible. that he knew everything about the Bible, that he could recite it back and forth 3 times over, and that he was an expert. Okay. Again, he's not a lawyer. He's also not a theologian, which means somebody who studies theology, religion, right? But he claimed to be an expert on the Bible. Okay. Before we get to the verdict and before I show you the video kind of highlighting this battle of the century, something to remember is that the purpose of this trial was to find if John Scopes was guilty or not guilty of teaching evolution. Obviously, it became so much bigger than that. And it was supposed to be, or it turned into basically fundamentalism versus modernism, that it was Clarence Darrow versus William Jennings Bryan, science versus religion, et cetera, et cetera. But the main purpose of this, or the main point of the trial, was basically just to figure out, is John Scopes guilty of violating the Butler Act? Okay. So this particular courtroom case, or this particular trial, took place over multiple days. People called in lots of witnesses on both sides, and it was broadcast to the nation on the radio. So the whole thing was broadcast for everyone to listen. Okay. Obviously, we don't have television at this time. It's not broadcasted for TV. It's broadcasted through the radio, and anybody who could listen would listen. So I'm going to show you guys this video, nice little drunk history, woohoo, about this, quote, battle of the century, about the 2 characters of Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan, and how they make a national name for themselves, okay? I got one more slide after the video, so not quite. Of teaching evolution, literally because he admitted to it, but like the last end of the video said, Clarence Darrow didn't want to win. He wanted to lose so that they could continue to take it to a higher court. It does eventually end up going to the Supreme Court, excuse me, and basically sets the basis that it is or at least for a while, that it is a state-by-state case that can decide whether or not you teach evolution, and that public schools should be held to some type of standard. Both lawyers were more concerned with winning based on their own beliefs than actually helping Scopes. That's why it becomes basically a conversation of fundamentalism versus modernism, not necessarily about is evolution okay to teach, okay? Scopes ends up having to pay a fine and can't teach anymore. He doesn't end up paying the fine, and he still gets to coach football. So who cares, right? And it brings the debate of fundamentalism versus modernism to the forefront of the public, puts everybody at odds with each other. It continues to rise through the ranks of these Supreme Court, all the way up to the Supreme Court, and basically makes a difference on how science is taught up till today. Okay. Huh? Here? I think they, a little bit. Yeah. All right, y'all. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you. Huh? Yes.